this microphone's working or not.
What? Oh, you have to turn it to the green. Yeah, no, it's fine. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for braving the Parada del Sol traffic and coming down to downtown Scottsdale today. Thank you very much, virtual audience, for joining us. I am really excited. I probably ought to move the shrubbery here. Um, to one of my favorite people, whom I have known for years because he originally wrote books under his real name, which is Conrad Dana Haynes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was back in, my God, was it the 90s?
It was the 90s, yes.
Right. And he wrote several books that I truly loved. And then suddenly there was this long hiatus, and I thought, what has happened to him? And then I got a book by a guy named James Byrne. Wow. And oftentimes when people take on pseudonyms, their publisher guards it. But I am a good friend of his editor. So he wrote to me to say, you're going to love this, he said, because it's actually Dana who wrote it. And I thought, yay, because I've really missed him. And so we got the first Des, and of course now I'm looking for the name.
The Gatekeeper.
Thank you, the Gatekeeper, and then we got Deadlock. And I thought, what a really interesting concept the Gatekeeper is. So let's talk a little bit. We don't need to talk about your past novels, do we?
Nah.
Are they even in print?
No,
No.
no, not at all.
Really been a long time, right?
It's been a while, yeah.
And tell me, first of all, it was a big shift in gear. What did you write your first three novels? I mean, as I remember, they were lighter and funny and not thrillerish.
They were cozies at a fictional college in Portland, Oregon, and they were decidedly different. And then after those three came out, I was with Bantam, and Bantam said, "We don't need any more books from you. Go away. Please don't let the door hit you on the butt on the way out." And so I then went into a real dry period where I went for 15 years and couldn't get published. I mean, I could have walked into a bank with a note that said I have a gun and no one would have read it. So it was just really, really, really bad. Then I got a new agent, Janet Reed, who passed away last year, and she took one look at one of my books and said, "Yeah, I could sell this." And 10 weeks later, she got a bid from our friend Keith Kayla at Minotaur. So it was the timing was right, and it was a different kind of book, and it was I think it was a right switch to make, and I was really, really happy with them. So
well, it was definitely the right switch to make for you at that time. But my question is, how'd you go from writing a cozy to writing about Des, the Gatekeeper, who is like such a great action hero? But in a way, he's kind of a cozy action hero.
Yes.
He is not. He's not bloodthirsty. He doesn't gratuitously kill people. He's not a sadist. He's not even, well, but a lot of them are.
yes,
So, I mean, Des is a really likable guy while he's kicking down doors and basically taking out the opposition.
I always write for myself. I'm the first reader, and I write books that I think would entertain me. And as my tastes in reading have changed since my youth, and there's just so many more great thriller writers out there today, and there's so many, and they're so good, and I admire them a lot. And so I decided I wanted to try that, but I couldn't make Des like everybody else. I had to try something different, and I wasn't sure what that was going to be exactly. And what I finally ended up with is he's from Great Britain, so that's different. Secondly, he's got this engineering background and all this tech knowledge in his head, which is interesting. And then third, he has no angst. He's a happy-go-lucky fellow who thinks he's the luckiest guy in the world and kind of really having a great deal of fun. And most protagonists for most action thrillers are kind of brooding, upset type sort of fellows. So writing about a guy who's just in a really good mood was...
He is. He's always in a good mood.
Yeah.
I know. That's one of the great things about him. He's so good-natured. But the other thing about him is he's totally self-confident. Never for a moment does Des think that he is not going to save the planet, or actually a small portion of it. And so that's a great combination. No angst and good nature.
Yeah.
I love reading about him. Why can't he be real?
Somebody wrote to me and said, "Des is my favorite literary boyfriend," and it was like the finest compliment that I've gotten.
That is a nice
It's a
comment.
great compliment.
So, Des Limerick, where did the name come from?
The name. The other problem with writing a single male protagonist action adventure book is it's really easy to get into toxic masculinity. Sometimes some of those books veer into an area that I'm a little uncomfortable with. So I needed to do something to make him less that. And one was to make him kind of a goofball and a fun, lovable guy. And the other was to give him just the stupidest name I could come up with. Now, I'm Irish American, and I like the name Limerick because it's a city and it drips off the tongue.
Not
And
only that, pause. Not only is it a city in Ireland, but it's a literary city. Yeah,
right.
it is famous. When I went to Ireland for the first time, John Connolly, the Irish author, knew I was going and asked if he could send me an itinerary. My husband, who knows John, said to me, "This is a really bad idea. He will not send you an itinerary that you like," because I'm kind of a luxury traveler. Rob didn't believe that. So as we got out of Shannon Airport and we drove to Ashford Castle, as the castle loomed up, Rob said to me, "John's got you. It's going to be a great trip." And in fact, Limerick was one of the places he sent us because there is a hotel there that holds conferences and has portraits everywhere there. But
I've been to Ireland and Northern Ireland, but I have not actually been to Limerick.
You
so now
haven't?
I have to.
all right, well, when you go,
okay.
I will put you in touch with John, and he
Okay.
can direct you
Okay.
to this hotel. I mean, you're sitting in the bar with, portraits of James Joyce and all these extraordinary Irish authors because they have come there. It's also a racehorse city, and so they have this large hotel because the racing supports it.
Okay.
So that's why they can afford to have writers like a writers conference. It's actually the horse money that
The writers' conferences don't make a dime.
That's
but
right.
that-
No.
yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So that's where the Limerick, the last name, came from. And then I wanted a single syllable first name, a nice, short, tight, bright. He's Desmond, but everybody calls him Des, and I hadn't seen that before. And as you probably know, there is an overabundance of Jakes and Jacks and Dirks, and there's a lot of names that appear in these action adventures. So I thought that was unique. And then Aloysius is his middle name because it's just the dopiest name in the world.
Oh,
So
no, it's hard to pronounce if you're not Irish.
it's tremendously hard to
Yeah,
pronounce.
most people fail at Aloysius.
There's always a moment in Act 1 of the books where some American is making fun of his name, and he's always a little bit upset by it because he thinks it's a perfectly fine name. But Desmond Aloysius Limerick giving him such a ludicrous name while he's such a tough guy and wins every fist fight he's in. Kind of leavened. It's like putting salt in something it's sweet. It makes makes the sugar pop.
So it's Des with a Z. I mean, even though Desmond is with an S.
It's
but
true. Desmond
I
is-
like that. So when we first meet him, he is in this amazing action scene. Tell us about it in, the first book, because, I mean, it's hard not to love him from right there.
Before I tell you that, let me tell you how
Okay.
that came about.
Oh, all
it's
right.
it's a prologue, and every editor I've ever had hates prologues. Every editor will say, "You don't start a book before you start the book. Start where you start. Start on page 1. You don't start before you start." So this book was being edited by our friend Keith, who is a most amazing editor, just a truly great editor. And he called me one day and said, "I think you need a prologue." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about? No editor likes prologues." He said, "I think you need one." So I said, "Well, I'm going to go ahead and write it, because then he'll take it out because no editor likes prologue." So I wrote it in about 2 hours.
Really?
Yeah, because I knew he was going to not like it, and he'd come to his senses. Lo and behold, he liked it. So it took me a couple of hours to write that scene.
This is here he is, really nice guy, journalism all his life, is a publisher of small newspapers in Oregon, nice married guy, wears pink shoes, and, right there. And so Des is in like this firestorm
Yeah.
in the first book. And I thought, I actually, Keith didn't tell me who you were until I read the book. He wanted to be sure that I would read it without any preconceived picture of you. And since I've known you for forever, I think he thought I wouldn't believe you could have written the book.
The opening scene takes place in Morocco, and what Keith wanted me to do is to establish the science background of why he's a gatekeeper. This guy worked in a military. He's retired at age 35, and I never say which military. There are clues to it. And he is a breach expert. His job is to open any door, keep it open as long as necessary, and control who does and does not get through it.
And then close it when he's done.
Right. And so Keith said, "Show us him in action back in his military days."
Right.
So I said, okay. So I did that scene. And it was not only do publishers and editors hate prologues, but he's sitting on his ass in the entire scene. He doesn't ever stand up in it. So I wrote a scene in which the man never stands up, knowing that Keith would hate that. And lo and behold, Keith really, really liked that scene and kept it
I
in.
really like that scene. So,
I've had people ask me about that thing because I do this weird thing with gasoline and a sprinkler and set people on fire because I'm twisted mentally ill, and this is much cheaper than therapy. But it ends up being a scene that people tell me they like a great deal. And it was really a scene I anticipated my editor was going to throw out.
I love that. So if it ever makes it to the screen, it'll make. Do any of you remember the first James Bond that Daniel Craig was in?
Yeah.
That was one of the most amazing opening scenes ever. It was high action, all this other stuff happened, and it went on, and then it ended. And so everybody at the movie theater sat back and thought, it's over. And then it wasn't over. There was another kind of thing. People just came right out of their seats, including me. You know, it really was. It was just brilliant, you know, that there was this like afterburner, aftershock from that. And I feel like Des is kind of like that.
Oh, my gosh. That's a great compliment.
Well, I meant it as one. Amazingly enough. All right. So what happens then in Gatekeeper? I'm assuming most people here haven't actually read it.
Not. So he's retired. He's a guitarist and a pianist, and he's traveling around the United States, and he's living in Los Angeles, just picking up gigs here and there. And he's in a hotel, and several armed men try to kidnap a woman. Des being Des, he decides to intervene. Then finds out that she's the chief legal officer for a multinational company that is essentially the bank for most of the world's militaries. And so Des is swept into this plot that involves some missing money from her company. And she doesn't know who in her company to trust. This guy obviously has proven that he is trustworthy, and he's not from her world, and she doesn't know who to trust. So she says, will you help me figure out who's the snake inside my company? Something's going on, and there's couple $1 billion are missing. And so that's how that book starts. It starts in Los Angeles and it goes to a fictional town in central California. Mm-hmm. I had to make it a fictional town because it made it just this absolute crappy, horrible town. And I thought, I'm not actually, the Chamber of Commerce or any real town will hate me if I use them. So that's why I invented a fictional town.
So in a way, it was kind of a Reacher scenario in the sense that if you remember in the second or either the third Reacher, he's just walking down the street in Chicago and the dry cleaner door opens and somebody stumbles out and he's there. So he, springs into action. So in a way, I'm not implying you're being derivative. I don't mean it that way. But I think it's interesting when you have a character who has no connection to what's going on step in. And it has to be a character, therefore, that has confidence in his own skill level.
Right.
And, otherwise they'd be cowering behind a door or running for the elevator.
Yeah. No, he is very, very confident, and he's very, very capable fellow. And he doesn't sound like he's that smart because his English is actually quite atrocious, but he has all this engineering background.
Right. And he's not a really big guy, is he?
He's 5'8".
Yeah, that's what I thought. So he doesn't even look, he's not like Reacher. He doesn't even look that threatening.
Yeah.
He's sort of what?
He's
big,
got
sideways, but not up.
He's muscly, and he's bow-legged, and he's got a kind of a roundish face and pink skin, and he looks a little silly. And so
I like the bow-legged part. You see him sort of rolling along there.
He's kind of
and he's not protecting his hands, and yet he is a loves music, loves to play. So I always think that's kind of interesting that he isn't making any effort to keep his hands safe.
That's a really good observation. That for a pianist and a guitarist, he gets in a lot of bare knuckle scrapes. I would be honest with you that I'd never put one and one together quite like that before. But it's a good point. Yeah.
Well, you can feel free to use it in another book.
Do you have a pen?
Right. Okay. So anyway, that's the Gatekeeper. Yeah. So what happens to him? He's not a guy who's really going to stay in the same place for long. So what happens to him in book 2?
In the book 2, there was a young vocalist and songwriter with whom he had performed. She's up in Portland, Oregon, and she calls and says, somebody's attacked my sister, and they've attacked her twice, and she's in the hospital, and I need some help. Des up stakes and moves to Portland, Oregon. Now, I've lived in Portland since my college days, and it was super. I love my city. It's a great place. My wife was born there, and we just adore it. But it was really fun. I got to introduce Portland through the eyes of somebody who hasn't lived there, and I had to remind myself about all the things that I love about Portland. So I had a tremendous amount of fun writing from the perspective of a guy who,
right.
This guy spent much of his life working in deserts, and so there's like 3 or 4 different times in that book where somebody says, they have unlimited potable water in Portland, Oregon. They have this massive water reserve up in the Mount Hood, and he just thinks that's amazing because he's been living in Tunisia. So unlimited potable water is a thing for him. So he gets up there, and the sister is a journalist. I'm a journalist, and somebody has attacked her because they think she knows something about an audit of a very green Silicon Forest type of company that's up there. And in point of fact, she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know why she's been attacked. So I got to spend that book in Portland, at the Oregon coast, in a town called Astoria, and also at a fictional high-tech campus in the Columbia River Gorge that I ended up completely destroying, both burning it and flooding it.
I know, and I hated that part because I have been. There's a terrific cruise that you can take, now upgraded to. The boat we were on was not ever one of my favorite boats, but subsequently, I won't even go into the Jones Act, but it was for a long time, only American crewed and owned ships could ply American waters, so they could get away with kind of low-grade ships and all. And then, I think it was Viking, relocated to Seattle or Tacoma, whatever it was. And so all of a sudden, you have this amazing cruise line ship company with real new ships and great stuff and all, able to navigate the Columbia, which meant that the other company really had to clean up its act, which they have done. So I love the Columbia River trip, hated the ship. Rob and I ate on shore at every opportunity. We even brought food back because the food was terrible. But the Columbia River Gorge was so spectacular.
It is.
And then we ended up at the Snake River. It was 104. We're getting off the ship into like a little boat to go down Hell's Canyon. I said to Rob, if we were home, we wouldn't even go out. You know, here we are, this boat going whatever. But I found that you're destroying the Columbia River Gorge was a step too far for me.
Okay. Well, as I told another,
although I was tempted at the time, right?
Yeah. Nobody pays me for under the top. So my books go over the top.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, right. In theory, you restored it. Okay. So you're on the river. So when we get finally to this wonderful book called Chain Reaction, he's still in Portland.
At the very first, he gets called from a mate who says, we're in New Jersey. We've got a gig. My bass player has COVID. I need a bass player. Can you come to New Jersey right away? So Des says, sure, good. So I created a fictional conference center adjacent to Liberty Airport in Newark. And Des gets there to this place, and lo and behold, almost immediately there's a terrorist incident, and the whole place is under siege. Des also runs into a woman he'd met before in the prologue who is a professional thief, and he convinces her to help him stop this thing that's happening. She doesn't want to because, as she repeatedly says to him, you understand I'm the bad guy in this story, right? I'm not heroic. But she ends up helping him. And then Des eventually connects to the band leader who had called him, and the band leader says, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't need a bass player. So somebody had lured Des there specifically for that incident. And now he realizes there's somebody else behind. There's a puppet master behind it. And that puppet master knows a lot about Des and about Des's past. So it's somebody from his own past who's lured him there. So that book starts in Jersey, goes to Manhattan, and then I take it to a fictional auto plant up near the Great Lakes, a place where they made cars that went bankrupt in the 1970s. So there's this behemoth campus that nobody's used for decades and decades, which ended up being a lovely set piece.
Yes. When he says that book, it's actually this book.
Yes.
But yes, just to correct you there on your. But anyway, yeah, we can't give too much away. But the thing I love about Des, I guess more than anything else, is that his level of self-confidence, but it's so quiet. And, you know, he's not, people don't panic when they see him, you know, because he looks so ordinary kind of, you know, he's short, bandy-legged and, you know, all the rest of it. And so he's always underestimated by the bad guys. And yet, in his own mind, he's actually like Reacher on steroids, you know? So I think that's just a great combination.
The other thing I wanted to do with Des, which makes him a lot of fun, is when it comes to the possibility of having sex, he's instantly 15 years old. He's the least smooth and suave dude in the world. He's always like, sex? Oh, that would be marvelous. Yeah, let's do that. That's great. And he is the anti-Bond, and it's so fun.
That's true. He is the anti-Bond.
He's instantly 15 years old. And it was so much fun to write a guy who isn't suave and cool with all the ladies. You know, he's like, oh, that would be marvelous.
And he usually
really
does
do
manage
that.
to
Yeah.
have one sex interlude in the whole thing, which I like too, because he's not. Yeah, I mean he's really a lot. You are having so much fun with him.
I'm having a great deal of fun with him. I really, really am. He in the start of the first book, he hits on a woman in an elevator, and she's clearly out of his league. He's so far out of his league that her two bodyguards snicker and laugh, and that's like I'd just never seen that in it. I've never seen that in this kind of book before. I thought, how much fun is that? You know, so his confidence is sometimes a little too strong. But.
So let me ask you, because your earlier publishing experience was not an entirely happy publishing experience, could you in fact be writing this if you hadn't done that?
Let me answer that obliquely by saying I'm super lucky. I've had really, really good editors. They've not always been the most polite and pleasant people, but they're darn good editors. My first editor was known to raise her voice, and she was known
a legendary tyrant. I'm here to tell you.
Oh yeah,
a legendary
to
tyrant.
this day, Bob Cray shudders when he hears her name.
I know, right?
Yeah. And she was really, really tough. But you know what? I came out of journalism, so I'd been edited by. Can I say asshole? I'd been edited by people with.
This is
with
not an
interpersonal
R-rated.
skills.
Feel free.
Okay, yeah, and so Kate was really tough, but she made me a better writer, and so I definitely improved because of her, and I was definitely taking a lot of Tums because she was driving me insane. But I'm grateful for that. And then when I got Keith Kayla, who did 4 of my books at Minotaur, which started with a book called Crashers. He's, on the other hand, is the sweetest guy in the world. Really, really nice. True story. On the first book, Crashers, that he did, he contacted me one day and said, on page 30, you do this scene from so-and-so's point of view, but on page 312, so-and-so needs to know that too. Would you consider? And I realized, good God, he has a better understanding at the macro level of my book than I have. That's how good an editor he is.
Yeah, he is.
Granular
He
level.
was a bookseller first. I want to point that out. Keith, who I've known practically my entire professional life as a bookseller, started as a bookseller and then wound up in New York.
He's great, and he currently has the 4th book, and I should be getting the edits back soonish. But I am grateful. He is wonderful, wonderful editor. So I've been very, very lucky.
Okay, but you didn't answer my question.
I don't know that I think I've grown and become a better writer from every good editor I've had, but I also had some bad editors for a couple of books I had when I was with Blackstone. They used outside independent editors. They were hires. And I had one fellow was going to edit my books, and the edits came back, and I read 10 pages of his edits and then stopped reading them and sent him a note back that said, we're not going to do anything you said here because you don't understand how mysteries work. You've changed my dialogue. You've changed who says the dialogue. You've added action sequences. So we'll be doing none of your edits whatsoever, and you really need to think about a new career.
Wow, that's telling him.
And 2 days later, I got a call from Blackstone saying, well, apparently he loved your book because he's gave it a thumbs up and handed it in already. So then I told them the story, and they were like, oh, God. Okay, we'll get you a copy editor. So that book was only copy edited. It never went through a editor. So I have had a couple of bad editors. But for the most part, I don't think I would be writing what I'm writing now if I hadn't had really good editors when I was younger.
But my question was larger than that. My question implied, would you even have been able to conceive of somebody like Des or think of these kinds of plots if you hadn't previously written other books?
I don't know. Des was with me for a long time before I wrote it. He'd been with me a great deal of time, and his name was Kell, and then it was Keller, and he was a cop, and he was in the kind of the deserts of California for a while. Then he was a criminal, and he was in his mid-50s, and he wasn't. And I'd been trying to write this guy for the longest time.
Really?
And eventually, the day that I figured out that he was from England was the day that I thought, oh, that's who this guy is. And once I had that, it's the Rumpelstiltskin effect. Once then I got his name, and then I wrote that first book, The Gatekeeper, in 90 days. Because then the pieces simply fell together.
Okay, so Stranger in a Strange Land worked better for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's often true.
Yeah,
I think.
I had to figure out that thing, that element, the je ne sais quoi that was missing. And once I did, then the book's super fun to write, and I'm having a grand time with them. but he needed to help me find who he was before I could finish that.
Excellent. Well, I don't know that we can say a whole lot more. I do think having an actual salaried job as a journalist probably sustains you through all of this. And you don't really have any great interest in retiring, do you?
I think about it from time to time. I work in the newspaper world, which means, we took a vow of poverty. It pays terribly badly, and my wife is a lobbyist, and she makes more money than I do, and
so far
the fiction the James Byrne pseudonym makes more money than I do as a journalist too. So the three jobs in our household, journalism pays the least. But it's what I've done most of my life, and I'm kind of proud of it. And I'm glad. It's nice to still say that we're a community journalism. We don't cover the nation, and we don't cover Oregon. We cover our little town, and I'm kind of proud of still being a newspaper man because there are not a lot of us on the ground any longer.
No, and not particularly not independently on the ground, which I think is great. I was telling Dana at lunch that I don't know. Do any of you live in Scottsdale? You do. So all of a sudden, one day, the Scottsdale Independent appeared in my mailbox. I think it was in my mailbox or my door or something. Not a paper I subscribe to, but it really is an independent newspaper, and it's totally focused on local news. And I'm pretty sure that the heavy advertising, because there's a lot of it, is what supports it. And probably they give it away because if they have a wider readership, they will be more successful in attracting advertising. But good for them in the sense that, they're just there to talk about Scottsdale. They're not talking about, state level politics or God knows national politics. And, I like that. So you're working in kind of a ethos of that, aren't you?
Yep. We're a chain of about 22 papers, mostly in the Portland, Oregon area, a couple in the high desert. And the Estacada paper only covers the little suburb of Estacada, and the Forest Grove paper only covers Forest Grove, and we're hyper-local. And my shop is large. The Portland Tribune is larger. I have 7 people on my staff, 8 if you count me. And most of the others are 1- and 2-person operations.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a church mouse operation. I mean, we barely eke by. We don't have any brick and mortar space any longer. My office is the corner of my apartment. But we've managed to keep the doors open so far, the metaphorical doors open so far. So knock on wood.
Well, we can hope so.
Yeah.
Right. Meantime, we're looking forward to Des number 4.
I am very excited about Des number 4, and I can say, I can't go into a lot of detail, but there's Hollywood has come knocking, and there's a producer attached to a Des movie, and there's a writer attached to a Des movie, and there's a studio attached now. And we could have some good news in this calendar year that I can announce with some more details. So we're very, 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 very excited about that.
So if you read it, you will see that he's almost a natural for the screen, I think.
Yeah,
anyway.
I think they're very
But I also think that casting really matters. There have been series that really work, and then there have been series where the casting wasn't so. I'm not going to mention any names, but...
no, you really should mention Tom Cruise and Jack Reacher at all. I agree with you. That's a good. Your logic is sound.
I'm not doing it. I actually did that in front of Lee one time at an event, and he pointed out that when that movie or when that book was sent to Hollywood, there weren't any tall leading men.
Yeah.
There were no big guys. There were action heroes. So it was Tom Cruise, despite the disparity there, because there really wasn't anybody else. Now, I think they may have gone to the extreme with Alan, on the other hand, but, right.
I think Alan Richardson is great because he's funny.
He's funny.
He catches the dry humor of the Reacher.
No, he does do it. But there was, in the second TV series, he actually had sex with one of the women and I went, ouch. And I wrote to Lee and I said, ouch. And he wrote back and said, she always has to be on top. So true. Really true. Right. Anyway, so, sometimes, casting is, kind of the luck of the draw at the time that, can go there.
Yeah.
But I think that Des is such a special character that it's really going to be a make or break on who's Des.
Yep. Knock on wood. We're my wife and I have this philosophy that every time there's even incremental good news about this, we pop some champagne and we toast it, because we always assumed that the deal was always going to fall apart, because they always fall apart. Every Hollywood deal I've ever heard about falls apart. So we always knew it was going to, right up until they said, "Can we get your bank routing codes because we need to give you some money?" So that was the first time we.
That's a good sign.
That's actually a very, very good sign.
You sure it wasn't phishing?
Now that you mention it, no. Do you know Barbara Poel, the agent?
I know who she is.
She has a great line about Hollywood. She always tells all of her writers, if Hollywood comes knocking about your books, you should pretend you're a goat herder. And every day morning you go down and you feed your goats and you water your goats. And one day when you go down, one of your goats turned into a unicorn. Don't make eye contact with it. Just keep feeding the other goats, keep watering them, pretend it isn't a unicorn. And in about 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, one of two things will happen. It'll grow wings and it'll fly away, or it'll turn back into a goat. It's going to turn back into a goat. So her whole thing is, these deals happen, but they always fall apart. Just
but
let
you
them
know
change
what?
your mind.
There's a lot of money in it. Tom Perry, who was here last week, said that in the course of his of his very long and very distinguished, authorial career, and he is the old man and all, he said most of his income has come from options. Most of the money he has made off his writing career has come from people paying, you know how options work. They pay you money in order to put a hold on your book in case they ever want to ever want to make it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it takes it off the table for other people to bid on it. But it doesn't mean in any way they're going to actually make it.
No.
As a movie.
I've had books optioned. Nothing ever happened with them, too.
Yeah. Right, yeah. But I mean, it's a pretty decent supplemental income for a writer. Take it, and you don't have to give it back if they don't make the movie.
Right.
I mean, it's their money to lose. It's not out there on loan.
Yeah. So this has gone well past that stage, and this is the stage of they're spending serious money to get a really good writer. And the producer used to run Warner Brothers, and
well, I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
A lot of I'd like it to be, like a good retirement package for a journalist who isn't going to get one from being a journalist. But at the same time, I would like to have more books about Des. And so, I have a entirely selfish motive here.
I have a new literary agent, and he's very exciting. And my literary agent passed away, and I'd been with him for a long, long, long time. And so I had to do that unfortunate thing of going out and trying to get a new agent. And this guy, John, was the only agent who said, "Oh, I've read your books. I like you. Your stuff's really fun." And John Talbot. And I thought, okay, that's going to be the guy I go with, because he showed enthusiasm for me. And so I've been with him now for about 6 months, and I just adore him. He's great.
Right. So you'll gather from this conversation, listening to Dana, a.k.a. James, that he's funny and he's a good-natured guy, and therefore Des is going to be a reflection of that. So, I think you're an excellent, promoter of your work just because of who you are. So, questions from any of you? Would you like to ask any? Have any of you read any of the books up until this point? You have. Which one have you read? And
you're clearly my favorite.
I'm sorry, you had a question.
Because, you have the silver and the gold, magical key cards that he knows that they're key cards. I mean, it's how much of this just comes from your brain and how much of it is reality? Because there's a lot of things in there that I've just never heard of, but with so many details, it has to be true.
So for the mic, the question was, how much of that weird tech do I make up, and how much is real? And the answer is a lot of it's real. A lot of it's I have to do research, and I do research in a method that's other writers refer to as stupid. I have a stupid method of research, which is to say, I don't do any of my research until I need it. I write up until I get to a sequence, and I think, oh wow, how is he going to get out of that? I don't know. Better do some research. So then I stop and do my research, and sometimes I will get into what my wife Katie refers to as a 40-page cul-de-sac. Well, I'll say, oh, there's no good way out of that problem. I'm going to have to erase the last 40 pages. She's a writer too. She would have an aneurysm if she had to erase 40 pages. But since I don't plot, I don't outline. I just make things up as I go. I will get to a point and think, oh, I better go do the research to figure out how a guy with his engineering background would get out of the situation. And that's when, but very little of, other than in the second book, the company that, the high-tech green Silicon Forest company got famous by inventing a thing, and that's totally made up. It's
Which is too bad.
it was kind of a cool idea.
There were a lot of parallels with, like, some of the TikTok scandals, as far as how invasive is, like, the clockjack technology, so I didn't know if any of that was based on, like, real things that were going on in the world. There were a lot of just kind of convenient parallels, but they were, like, off the charts parallels. So,
Somebody, and I want to say it was, I can't remember which magazine, but some magazine, gosh, shucks, I should know this, wrote an article last year that said the villain wears a hoodie, and pointing out how many high-tech tech bros have become bad guys in so many movies and books right now.
And in real life as well. Come on.
That's why. I think, so I wanted to do a high-tech bad guy, and then when I did, suddenly they were all over. There were high-tech bad guys everywhere. And some of it is people like me. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I don't really understand how social media works. I don't quite understand any of that tech stuff, so I find it invasive and a little creepy. Everybody knows that thing where you said to your wife one day, time for us to think about getting a new toaster, and then you get ads for toasters. Freaks me the hell out. I just freaks me. Yeah, not as much as your driverless cars in this town. That totally freaks me out. But so making a high-tech bad guy was something I really wanted to try and do, and the thing that they are famous for, the thing they invented, was totally fictional. But all the things that Des does, I do a bunch of research and find out, yes, there's people who know how to do that thing. So. And I'm not a techie in the slightest. I mean, I can't change the light bulb in my apartment. I'm the least technically oriented dude in the world. So I've got a guy who, A, is an engineering tech genius, and B, plays guitar and piano. I have not a musical bone in my body. So those, and C, he's from England. So it was, I actually walked myself into writing a character who's so unlike me that it takes a ton of research.
Yeah, but at the same time, maybe that distance helps make him who he is.
It's possible, yeah. I made a mistake, a musical mistake, and Keith caught it. I had Des referencing a song, and Keith said, oh, that's the least best version of that song. You need to go back to so-and-so who did a much better R&B version. Thank God Keith Kayla has this encyclopedic knowledge of pop culture and saved me from a dumb error in one of the books.
We go out to dinner on the first night of every conference where we both attended, and those are actually the reason I go to a lot of conferences, just to have dinner with Keith.
He's charming, and he's a Texan, and he's just, I'm really super lucky. He's made me a much better writer.
Anyone else? Yes,
what is your writing routine? Do you write from morning to night, or do you write and then take a break? Or?
For the mics, that question was, what is my writing style? And I'm going to move away from the camera for 1 second to show you how I do it, because the way I do it is unlike anybody else. Longhand and a steno pad. Okay. I'm the last guy alive who writes longhand. And the reason I do it is because, A, I'm a newspaper journalist, and I've been in a million school board meetings and county commission meetings, so it's the medium I'm comfortable with. But it slows my brain down, because if I get going, if I try and do first drafts on the computer, the writing isn't as good. It's thinner. That's probably not the word I was looking for. It's just less nuanced. It also is a metronome, because I can get 350 words on a steno pad page with a mechanical pencil. And in those 350 words, I better have moved my plot or my character development or a joke or set up a mystery. And if I haven't, then my pacing is off. So it gives me a metronome for my pacing. And so I write in the morning, longhand, go and do my journalism job. Then in the evening, I type it into my MacBook. Which means I'm being creative and using that half of my brain in the morning, and I'm being analytical and using that half of my brain in the evening. And in the evening, I get to say to myself, that was pretty good. This stuff's good. This stuff's carrying the freight I needed it to. Or, was I on crack this morning? This is horrible. It's terrible. And erase it. But because I'm doing that daily, I don't want to say a daily affirmation per se, but it's a daily edit of that is 10 hours later. So it's, it's not. It's.
Yeah, but
I catch a lot of stuff.
It's also different when you move it from one platform to another. It really is different. Totally. I find, often writing the book news, if I do something in an email and I put it then in the print document, somehow or other it changes. It looks different, and I get to fix it. Or conversely, you see things that you missed. And I think it's probably really, P.D. James wrote that way her entire life. She always wrote it in longhand, and she hired somebody to type it in, and then so she could look at it. She also never had a book contract. She always wrote, and then when it was done, she'd send it off.
I'll be darned. I didn't
I
know.
know, yeah. No, I've had dinner with her a couple of times in London and all, and she was when she was alive.
Yeah.
But she
know
felt like writing it was the key in longhand.
Yeah, no,
to do that.
It definitely for me it definitely works. And when you put it in the computer, you'll find mistakes you didn't see before. Then when you print it out, half by
Once
11,
again,
you'll find mistakes you didn't know. And then not always, but sometimes I will then take the manuscript, turn it into a PDF, and send it to my Kindle and read it on my Kindle, and I'll find more stuff.
but I don't think mistakes is quite the right word. I think you find a better way of saying
Sure.
things. I don't
think
think, mistake implies that you screwed up the grammar or your punctuation was off. That's not really true. What you find is that there's a better sentence or a better paragraph or whatever it is.
Yep, that's a very
You're editing yourself.
That's a very good observation. That was perfectly okay, but I could have done it better.
Yeah.
It's the note I make to myself on the side of the printed. I'll say CDB can do better, because that scene worked or that description was okay. The other thing I do when I write is I will have Des walk into a bar, and then I will bracket it and write the word splaino, SPLAINO, end bracket. And I don't describe the bar because I'm going to get to that eventually. And I just keep writing and keep writing and keep writing. And then one day I don't really know what the next scene's going to be. So I'll do a search for the word splaino and go back and say, oh, I never got around to describing the bar. Today I'll do that one. Oh, I never got around to describing what that car looks like. Today I'll do that. And so and that means I'm always constantly moving forward. And I know so many writers who do a thing where they're like, I've been working on this book, and it's really, I'm going to get it. I'm on chapter 1, and I've been on chapter 1 since 1994. But when it's right, and I was like, just get your master's degree in whatever that is and stop it. You're never going to be a novel, because they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But my system means I'm always moving forward, and I can generally write a first draft in about 3 months because of that system. So I'm pretty darn fast. Well, for a guy who has no other hobbies and doesn't have any, people always say, "How do you do that and have a day job?" And I say to other writers, "How do you do that and have kids?" So, I mean,
You've had lots of practice over the years. I mean, your day job is writing, and your
my one skill
other
in this
job
entire planet
is writing. So
smacking
it
nouns
works
into
out.
verbs. That's all I know how to do.
Anybody else? No? We've dazzled you, right? Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure to have you here. We've done Zoom events for the first 2 books because the first one came out during COVID.
Right.
So I'm really glad that this time we actually got you to Scottsdale.
This was tremendous fun. Thank you very much, and thanks to this great audience. I really appreciate y'all coming out.
Absolutely. Love it. So, round of applause. Yay. Now, did we give out numbers? We probably didn't today, did we? Did we? No. All right. Let's ask a question, because I'm going to give away an autographed copy of Tom Perry's new book, Pro Bono, because